Is your child currently studying for the foundation paper tier and you're wondering whether is that the right choice and could the foundation paper be holding them back? Well, many parents assume that the higher tier paper is automatically better, but that's not always the case. So in this video, I'm going to help you understand the differences between the higher paper tier and the foundation paper tier for science. We're going to look at the pros and cons of each tier, and I'm going to help you decide what's best for your child's confidence, their progress, and ultimately their future plan. Okay, so I'm going to jump straight into it. So the first thing we want to look at is the difference between foundation and higher tier. The main difference is that in the foundation tier, students get a maximum of grade 5, whereas in the higher tier, students can get up to grade 9. Around 20 to 30% of the questions, though, are shared between both papers. So that grade 4 to 5 area that is shared between the foundation paper as well as the higher paper. So there's that grade 4 and 5 overlap. Now, if you look at the papers in a bit more depth, the biggest difference is skill and depth of understanding that is required for each paper. So for the foundation paper questions, they tend to be recall-based questions. They tend to focus on short answer questions and multiple choice questions. For the higher paper questions, it tends to be more application questions that shows, and they expected to show a thorough understanding of the content. It also tends to have more longer structured responses as well. So in a nutshell, that's the difference between the foundation and the higher tier paper. Now, I'm going to go into the pros and cons in a minute, but before we do that, at this point, you might be thinking, well, how can I actually help my child boost their GCSE science grades no matter which tier they're going to be taking? Well, what I've done is I've put together a free PDF guide with the top 5 techniques and strategies to help your child improve by up to 2 grade levels in science. So you can grab that PDF guide in the description down below. All right, so pros and cons of each tier. Let's jump into that. We'll start with the higher paper. We'll look at the pros first, the positives. One of the main positives of the higher tier paper, depending on how you look at it, although there's more to take into consideration, is that less marks are required. So for instance, less marks are required to achieve a grade 5. So for instance, about 30% to achieve a grade 5 in higher versus the foundation. But obviously you need to take into account that there are more questions, the questions are more in-depth, the students need to learn more and so on and so forth, but we'll talk more about that as we get through the paper. Another advantage is it's easier transition onto A-level science. So because they cover, the higher paper covers more content, it starts to bridge the gap between GCSE and A-level more. It starts to cover a bit more of that A-level content. So if a child is going to do an A-level science subject, then they are going to be better placed if they've done the higher content versus if they have done the foundation paper. So those are the 2 key positives. Now let's look at the cons. The main obvious cons for the higher paper is that there's more content to cover. So especially if the child is doing higher triple, there's even more content to cover. So if a child is potentially already on a foundation track and they're struggling with the time management and all of that content to cover, then doing the higher might not be ideal. The question styles are more challenging. So it really tests their in-depth knowledge, their understanding and application. And another negative of the higher tier paper is it can knock a child's confidence if they're one of the students that struggle with things like extended questions and they're sort of trying to do that and they're not doing very well on it, then it can knock their confidence. Whereas if they're doing the foundation paper and they're okay with it, they'll still do well. All right, now let's jump into the foundation paper, the positives, the pros of the foundation paper. One of the most obvious pros of the foundation papers is there are less content. So the way it works is that, you have normally foundation combined science, although you also have foundation triple science, interestingly, but foundation combined science, Then you have higher combined science, which has a bit more content, and then you have higher triple science, which have a bit more content. So if the child is doing foundation, whether it's the triple foundation or combined foundation, but many students do combined foundation, then there's less content to cover, and that means less stress, right? So it's not more things to cover. And a good thing about this is it means that the child have more time to focus on the subject and get better. So that's a positive. Another positive is many students perform better in the type of questions that are in the foundation paper. So those short questions, those multiple choice questions. So if that's what a child does well at, then foundation paper might be good for them. And another great positive is they can still earn a grade 5, which is the old B, so equivalent to that old B. And there are many students who can do very well in the foundation paper and get a grade 5, but if they attempt to go and get a grade 5 in the higher tier, they might slip down to a grade 3 or even below. Okay, now what are the negatives? What are the cons of doing foundation tier? Well, the main con is that grade 5 is the maximum grade that they can get. And that means if they want to go and do a science-based course, they might find that challenging. So they probably would need at least a grade 6 to put them in a good standing for sixth forms, further education institutions, higher education institutions, and so on and so forth. The other cons, which some people might see as a cons, but again, you need to think about the way the questions are structured, is that more marks are needed to get a higher paper in the foundation. So as I said earlier, you're looking at about maybe 60%, on average, perhaps, to get a grade 5 in the foundation paper, where it's about half of that for a higher paper. Okay, so that's the pros and cons of the foundation and the higher paper. The next thing is that you want to be able to decide which tier is going to be best for your child. Now, ultimately, the decision normally comes from the school, but however, having the knowledge will help you guide your child in terms of what's going to be best suited for them based on where they are at right now and based on their future career goals and plans. So in terms of how to decide, what do you need to think about? Well, have a think about, firstly, how does your child perform with exam questions? So I have worked with many students over the years, and I have seen students who actually understand, they have a good knowledge of the subject, and they put their hands up and they answer questions, and you think, oh, that child's going to do, we have a mock test today, we have a test, that child's going to do really well in the exam. When they come back, you're actually surprised by their grades and they do quite poorly, right? And these are some of the students who understand things, but for some reason just get tripped up with exam paper questions. These kind of students are probably better suited for the foundation tier, right? So these kind of students, we normally find that they do better with shorter questions and they do better with multiple choice questions. So have a look at your child when they're doing exam paper questions. How are they getting on? If they are thriving with the longer, more extended 6-mark questions, 4-mark questions, and so on and so forth, then in that case, the higher paper might be better for them. What about application-based questions or things like mathematical, scientific investigation questions? You get a lot of that in the higher paper. So if they're confident with maths, if they're confident with graph skills, practical skills, then the higher paper tier would then be suitable for that child. And importantly, the third thing is we need to look at their career goals. Do they want to go into a science-based field? If they do, then doing the higher paper will put them in more of a good standing. You know, for many reasons, they would get that better grade, which makes them more competitive. And also, it will just basically open up the doors for them a bit more. So if they want to, if they want to go into a science-based subject, then trying to aim for a higher paper is better. If, on the other hand, your child is planning on doing a vocational-based course such as BTEC or T-levels, or even maybe aligned science subjects like psychology or sociology, then doing the foundation paper is fine. Because with the foundation paper, a grade B is a grade 5 is a grade 5, whether they get it on the foundation or the higher. This is a key thing to note. Whether they get a grade 5 on the foundation or higher, it doesn't matter. They all get the same certificate of a grade 5. It doesn't say foundation or higher. So that's a very key thing to note. Now, one word of warning that you really need to know is that if the child is currently sitting a foundation paper now, please do not push them to revise with the higher paper, the higher content, the higher topics. There are a lot of parents that think that's the best way to go, but actually you're doing them more harm than good, because if they haven't understood the foundation content and they're trying to learn the higher, it's confusing for them. But it also wastes a lot of time, because they might start revising the higher, but then at the end of the day, the school might say, well, oh, we're going to put your child in the foundation, right? Yet they've spent all of that time learning higher, when all of that time could have spent going into learning foundation and do really great at foundation. So that's one thing to really take into account. Now, if your child is currently at the foundation level and they're aiming to go to the higher level, there's several things that they can do as a stepping stone to get to the higher level. And I've put that together in a video, and that video will be coming up shortly. So yeah, that's it. That's it for this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.